No error is forever, this reading says. No error is forever. None who works for self-redemption will ever meet an evil destiny. What a beautiful promise this is to all of us. We are all in this room working towards self-redemption. We're searching for God. We want to love God more. We may feel like the foolish virgin. We may feel like we've failed again and again spiritually, but we are trying. And we are making an effort just to be here, to sit in these chairs today. We are making a spiritual effort to try to know God. That word, work, is the key. He who works for self-redemption. And what does that mean? We don't have to be afraid of that word, work, and think, oh no, I have enough work already, I don't need more work. It means put your energy into it. Put your heart into it. The spiritual path is all about the heart's devotion. It's all about cultivating love for God. You read the lives of the saints, they are myriad in their attitudes and their expertise and their skills and their cultures. Some are brilliant scholars, some are humble, uneducated little bhaktis, little devotees of God. Each one of us is a saint in the making. That's what we're here for. This school is all about sainthood 101. This is us. So how do we cultivate that heart's devotion? How do we work towards self-redemption? How do we put our energy into it? One of the simplest ways is kirtan, devotional singing. We had a beautiful kirtan on Friday evening. And it's important to remember that it's not just the Lord speaking to me. Devotional singing is not just, oh, nice little songs and you repeat them and there's music and isn't that sweet? Kirtan is scientifically designed by the ancient rishis, by the ancient sages, to awaken the heart's devotion. That's its purpose. Just like the yoga postures were scientifically designed to get the body ready to sit and meditate, chanting was scientifically designed to get the mind quiet so it could meditate. So, singing, very simple. And Master said of the 8 ways to experience God, the 8 ways that the soul can experience God, sound is the easiest one. So don't disregard singing. Even these little Christmas carols that we're going to sing today, they have that love of God in them. And value that devotional singing because it's very powerful. Study is another essential for awakening the heart's devotion and keeping that fervor going. You will read, and I was reading something some weeks ago that has kept coming into my mind, and I keep meditating on it. It was a line from one of Swami's books, and he said, pleasure and pain are not that different from each other. They are both expressions of separateness. I kept thinking, well, I've had pain, I've had pleasure, they're really different. No, they're not that different. They enforce the ego. They limit us. They make us think the opposite of what this affirmation was saying, that I am this body, I am these thoughts. My
degree is my own. I've worked for whatever I have, and it's all mine, and this is my self-identity. But Master is telling us, no, you are so much more than that. You are the immortal soul. Just like in the Festival of Light, that line in there that says, pain is the fruit of self-love, whereas joy is the fruit of love for God. That line is worth meditating on. What does it mean? Well, it's very similar. What we love is what we concentrate on. And if we have self-love, we're concentrating on us. And there's nothing but pain in there. Pain is the fruit of self-love. We need to concentrate on God. Have thoughts of God. Live for God. And the fruit of that is joy. A joy that doesn't end. So singing, study, and service. Thinking about others. I can't tell you how many times, and when I was a young devotee, Swami would look me in the eye and say, just forget about yourself and serve. And when I did that, there was joy. No matter what I was going through, no matter what my life looked like, if I could forget about myself and give and give and give energy, there was God there. There was joy there. So that's a real key to it. Well, one of the great servants of God who served so selflessly and beautifully was St. Nicholas. Today is his feast day, December 6th. And St. Nicholas, there are many wonderful stories about him. And of course, Santa Nicolaus, through the ages, since the 4th century when he lived, became our Santa Claus. And so, boy, we are really getting a lot of ringtones today. Music, I guess because I'm talking about music and how powerful. But Santa Claus must be here with us today. Santa Claus, there's many wonderful stories about him, but one of the things that he liked to do is he liked to give gifts secretly. He wouldn't tell anybody where they came from. They would just appear. And one story of his doing this was a very, very poor family of his acquaintance. They had 3 daughters. And in the 4th century, and this was in Turkey, in that area of the world in that time, there were not a lot of options for women. And if those girls didn't have dowries, they would come to a very bad end. And St. Nicholas knew this. And so when the oldest girl came of age, and the family were praying, they had no idea what to do for this girl. In the middle of the night, St. Nicholas took a little bag of golden coins and tossed it in the doorway. So when they woke up in the morning, there was enough money for the dowry. And then some years later, the second daughter came of age, and again the family was desperately praying. And in the morning, they found that little purse of gold. The second daughter was saved. Well, the father was starting to get the idea of something was going on here. And so when the third daughter came of age, he waited up to see where this gift was coming from, and he caught St. Nicholas. And he fell to the ground and thanked him with all his heart. And St. Nicholas raised him up and he said, "Don't thank me. Thank God. Thank God alone." That is selfless service. Don't think about yourself. Just give to the best that you can, the most love that you can. And and don't think of anything in return. And that humility and that gratitude for the giver behind all gifts. I was reading an article recently in which it said, I love articles like this, it has been clinically proven that attitudes of humility and gratitude have positive health benefits. I love that. Well, thank you, the scientific community. It's true, though. That feeling of humility and gratitude will help us cultivate these spiritual attitudes for what you can get out of them. And give that love, because that love will be returned to you 1,000-fold. So during this holy season, I know it's difficult not to get caught up in the busyness and the stress and all the stuff that goes on. I think that's why we had so many ringtones today. We never have a ringtone in the middle of service, but there's just so much going on. The energy is so high. If you feel stress, or if you start to lose center during this month, think of it this way. This is a great little trick. Think, thank you, God, for working on my nervous system. Master Yogananda said that the nervous system has to be able to withstand the shock of omnipresence, the liberating shock of omnipresence. And so that's what stress is. It's maxing out the nervous system, testing it, getting it stronger. So think of it that way. Think of it and then pray, thank you, Lord, for noticing me and taking a moment to work on my nervous system, but could you back it off just a little bit? And remember, Yogananda also said that God and the angels, even God and the angels in heaven, celebrate Christmas for the good of all creation. So tune into that. Imagine decorating for the astral world. Imagine the parties in heaven. Imagine the jubilation and the celebration. And see if you can tune into that and make that your reality. Because when you're stressed and when it's too busy, you miss the sweet little moments. And you don't want to miss any of that. Be with God this season. Let that Christ energy awaken in your heart.
In the topic today, what is it to fail spiritually? It's not a very inspiring notion to go into, and yet it's important for us to sort of recognize, how do we aim at the mark? How do we hit the mark? What happens if we miss the mark? And I thought to tell a couple of stories, because often we get hit with a surprise and we think, oh, it didn't work out. Is this thing, it is on, believe it or not. Yeah. Anyway, but if I'm not being picked up, I must pick her up. Some years ago, when our work in Italy was getting started, there was a time when both Nirmala and I lived over there. Nirmala first, and then in the mid-'80s, and I lived there in the late '80s. We used to go and sing in the churches in Assisi, and actually all around the area there. Swamiji's music, and beautiful, you know, in these cathedrals, I mean, the sound just rings. I mean, I remember walking in and hearing one of our choir singing a solo, and it was just, I walked in the rear of the chapel. It might have been the cathedral that St. Francis was baptized in, which was already an old church by the time he was baptized there, and that was in late 1100s. Anyway, it was exquisitely beautiful. But the word started to get around, and the church wanted to know what for, and finally Swamiji and the Bishop of Assisi met. And this conversation all happened in Italian, but the gist of it was that this bishop didn't take kindly to the fact that Swami and we were all there, and who the heck were we after all? And Swamiji started to explain, you know, we are Christian. And the man said, no, you're not. Swami said, well, yes, I am. No, you're not. Well, and so, you know, they were having this debate back and forth. And Swami said, I think I should be the one to decide that. No, you're not. No, I decide who's a Christian and who isn't. And, you know, finally it got to the point where this bishop said, have you been saved by him? And Swamiji's answer, and some of these things, they have to well up from your heart. You can't think them through. In retrospect, maybe you could think them through. You could think, I should have said this. Swamiji said, it's my job to love him. It's his job to decide whether to save me. Mm-hmm. And that completely changed the conversation. The bishop just backed right down. And they had actually a very warm conversation at that point. Because you can't make something like that up. And so, what is it to fail spiritually? I mean, sometimes someone is telling you, no, you're not. You're not okay. You're not good enough. You're not whatever. And you have to feel in your heart, what is my true reality? What is where and what is my soul in this situation? And I read a couple of stories, and strangely, these are not, I will say that these are not typical Christmas stories because they both involve the Second World War. But for some reason, they touched me. This week, just this week, an American serviceman was honored by the country of Israel for his contribution in the Second World War to saving Jews. First time ever for an American serviceman. There were a handful of other Americans throughout these decades who were so honored for volunteer work or for this or for the other thing, but never a serviceman. And the story came out in this very unusual way. The man himself never told anyone what happened. But he and around 1,000 American prisoners had been captured as a result of some battle that happened. They were taken into a concentration camp, and they were ordered to separate themselves into the Jews on one side and everyone else on the other. And the person who was sort of the ranking officer, who wasn't really, I think he just happened to be the one who was the highest one in the group, said, we're all Jews. And, you know, the German fellow said, because he knew that something bad was going to happen to whoever went in the other group. And this German said, no, you're not. There's no way. You cannot be. Yes, we're all Jews. The guy put a gun up to his head and said, now you tell me, very specifically. And the man gave his rank, his name, and his serial number, and he said, you're going to have to kill all of us because we know who you are. We're going to win this war, and you will all be tried for war crimes. And he would not back down. And the Jews were not separated out, and they all survived. And that sort of, you know, you get stuck in a moment like that. How are you going to make that kind of decision? It has to come from someplace deeper, someplace within. This story was actually revealed by one of the Jews who was in that group, who had been captured. And it came out decades later. The man's own son had never heard the story. His father never told him, never revealed it. But this person, this Jewish fellow, later on, decades later, told the story, and it was corroborated. It It was corroborated from multiple sources. Just last week it came to light. The second story also involves a kind of failure, in a sense, or a kind of critical moment, where it's also happened in the Second World War. The Allies were marching through Italy, and came to it came to be known to them, to their commander, that a certain town had surrendered, and they understood that the Germans had all left that village. And so there was no more equipment, there was no more army there. And so a Canadian fellow was given the job with another officer. He spoke German fluently, he spoke Italian fluently. They were given the job, go into this place and assess the situation, and let us know what's there and what's not, and etc. So we understand what is the situation there. So they started driving a couple hours through the countryside and got going in conversation, and never noticed as they got to this little town, they drove right into the center of town. It had not been abandoned by the Germans. The Germans were in full force there. They were in a fully marked Canadian Jeep, in their full uniforms as Canadian officers, and they had a situation because they were in a place where their lives were in very serious danger, and they didn't know it, or they did know it as they got there, and they suddenly realized, what we had been told wasn't sort of working out. So the fellow who spoke German very energetically and authoritatively asked someone on the street, where is the headquarters? And he was directed there. They drove to that place, and he went marching straight in, and he said, I'm here to accept your surrender. And there was a sort of a momentary flutter on the German side. And then the commanding German officer said, yes, we surrendered. And it's a true story, and it happened. Now, I think that there were some other circumstances that are not told, like it was 1945. They knew they were losing. It was about to, they were tired of being stuck in this spot, et cetera, et cetera. But it actually happened. So often in life, we get to a critical moment and we think, I screwed up. It's all over. I lost. I messed it up. It's all wrong. It didn't go the way I wanted it to. I read another article this week about someone's, in a couple of weeks we're going to talk about the three wise men, so I don't want to jump the gun too much, but his supposition was that when they arrived at the stable, they were surprised to find A, a stable, B, a infant king, etc. So his whole little discussion in there was, what do you do with that kind of surprise? Well, you give the best that you have to give. I happen to think that they were not that surprised. I think they knew perfectly well what they were coming towards. But nevertheless, in our lives, we get surprised by circumstances, by situations, and we think, oops, it's all over now. Oh, that one really went south. That's a big problem. And we have to practice, and this is the part where in the reading it talks about keep that lamp of devotion lit, because you don't know the day, you don't know the hour, and as the Bible also very colorfully puts it, he comes like a thief in the night, just like St. Nicholas did in the story that Nirmala was telling. In that case, to throw a little bag of gold inside the door, but in other cases, that's how and when he comes to us. He comes when we may least expect it. But if we always expect it, if we train ourselves to always expect, then what we find is that he's always with us. And we are, perhaps the most important thing is we are always ready to receive. And I also would want to add with what Nirmala said, in this season, we have an amazing opportunity to receive God's grace and to receive God's light. Christ is being born again. We don't even have to wait for Christmas Day for this to happen. Yes, we celebrate on Christmas Day, but in our hearts, he can be born in this moment. In fact, he is born now. It is always now when Christ is born. And that's the secret of keeping the lamp lit. Ignite that devotion, as Nirmala said, through chanting. I will add through meditation. We have these wonderful meditations coming up in celebration of Christmas. Come to one, come to both, come to other ones as well. But invite and invoke that presence in every situation. In social Christmas, in spiritual Christmas, in driving down the road, in being busy, in decorating your house, in baking cookies, or whatever it may be, whatever may seem the most humble, the most least likely, God is in that. And we all need to remember it, and we need to practice that remembrance. Because life does challenge us. We'll find ourselves in situations where, gosh, that's not how it was supposed to be. And yet, that's how it is. And we just have to work with it as best we can and remember our center. And from that center, we get the message, oh, this is what I need to say. This is what I need to do. This is how I need to be. And it flows, and we realize that God is with us. And yes, in the reading, Swamiji says, yes, it is a disappointment to fail spiritually. Yeah, we have all at one time or another failed in one way or another. And yet, in the last analysis, there's no such thing as failure. There's only the learning process that leads us to final success. And that is the path that we're all on. And it's a joy to be able to share it together.